I'm Dylan.
And I'm Keon.
And this is Triple Play, that podcast that's just not even funny because this time we watched Beverly Hills Chihuahua.
Written by Annalisa LaBianco, Jeff Bushell, Dana Feinglass, Danielle Schneider, and Dana Starfield.
Directed by Raja Gosnell, Alex Zam, and Lev L. Spiro.
And released in 2008, 2011, and 2012.
So, let me break down some behind-the-scenes stuff. When we decide on the trilogies to watch every season, we've quickly realized we're running out of good trilogies. So we'll start sprinkling in some bad trilogies, just to make the good ones last longer. And so we decided, hey, Beverly Hills Chihuahua, that cinematic masterpiece, cannot wait any longer.
Yet, I think if we knew at the time, this bad trilogy does not even begin to describe these movies. I think if we knew at the time, we wouldn't even touch these movies with a 10-foot pole. I legitimately despise all three of these movies.
I wouldn't say... I haven't seen any of these before this trilogy, watching for this podcast, I should say.
Neither have I.
I wouldn't say that these three movies are the worst movies I've ever seen, necessarily. I'd say they're close. The first, not the first one. I have some thoughts on the first one to talk about in a bit. The second and the third, for sure, are definitely my bottom 25 for sure. Because the sad thing is, unlike movies like Troll 2, this one actually is made by people who are somewhat competent and know how to assemble a movie, even if everything they assembled sucks. But I do think that as a trilogy, this is the worst set of three movies together collectively that we've watched for this podcast. And on that topic, I am so glad that this season we decided to mix up the format to be more about talking about the movies and less behind the scenes, because boy, do I have thoughts on these movies.
Yeah, and since you bring that up, we should also just say that, I think the new format that we've kind of decided to go forward with, is going to let us, or is going to allow us, or is going to make us want, at least, to only choose movies that we at least think are going to be good.
Possibly. I think it'll make us choose movies that we want to discuss, which in general will correlate with movies that are good, but might not always necessarily.
But I think it also opens us up to watching trilogies that aren't necessarily made as trilogies, so that gives us a lot more options. And it expands the range a lot.
Yeah, it allows us to do a lot of thematic trilogies. I know off recording and I think on the Mad Max trilogy episode, talking about doing movies that are these are three movies that came out the same weekend. How do they compare? Or these are three movies based on around similar topics. Think Bug's Life, Ants, some other bug-related movie. And then also movies that are oh, these are the first three movies that acclaimed director Steven Spielberg made. How do these work as a thematic trilogy? What are the kind of through lines that we can see here for director Steven Spielberg, just as an example, using Steven Spielberg?
Yeah, and I was even thinking you could even do something watch 2001 Space Odyssey, Solaris, that Russian movie that came out around the same time, and then I don't know, something from the UK, and see that came out around the same time that was sci-fi, and kind of see how, different, I guess, people from around the world, kind of tackled some of the same concepts.
Interestingly, 2001 A Space Odyssey was filmed in the UK, so that would be very interesting.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Right next to the prisoner.
But in that aspect, I am excited for this new format, because that too, all of those possibilities will de-incentivize us from watching a lot of bad trilogies. I will say, however, I don't want to completely remove bad trilogies from the entirety of the podcast, because I do think there is a benefit to watching bad movies every so once in a while, and that is that you appreciate the good movies more. For example, for me, when I watch a movie that's just completely incompetently edited, I start to really appreciate small editing things that maybe I never noticed before more.
No, yeah, and we also just won't know for some of the trilogies. We might choose one that we think we're gonna like, and it turns out we both hate it or something like that. You know,
Right.
which fits in nicely with this one. You know, I don't think either of us went into this thinking we would like it, but I didn't think it would be as big of a train wreck as it was.
No, and I think when we chose this trilogy, I think there was an element of like, okay, this isn't a very well regarded trilogy, but how bad can it be? And I think that kind of trilogy too will have a place in this new format because it'll be very much like our curiosity will be like, well, how bad could it be? And those are the bad trilogies we'll probably end up watching, less so than the ones that are like, well, this is bad, but we have to do it. And I think this is one of those like, how bad could it be trilogies? And you know what? If I could go back in time to when we decided on the trilogies for this season, because here's the other thing. Presumably, people know what trilogies we're doing this season, but in case they don't, I believe we're doing Dark Knight. We've done Mad Max. We're doing this. We're doing 50 Shades of Grey. We're doing How to Train Your Dragon, I believe, and I'm missing one more.
Yeah, I forgot what the last one was.
But
Shoot.
in general, all of the other trilogies we're doing this season are considered to be good. 50 Shades of Grey is kind of on the borderline, but from what I've heard is that at the very least the movies are competently made and are watchable. So this is probably going to be the low point of this season.
Yeah, sure hope it is. I mean, sure hope none of the other ones are as unenjoyable as this was. Or sure hope they're... Yeah, what I said was right.
What is the other trilogy we're watching this season?
Oh, it's the Da Vinci Code.
Right.
The last one is the Da Vinci Code.
The Da Vinci Code, okay. So Da Vinci Code is also like one of those, like, they're watchable, like 50 Shades of Grey. I will say that the third movie, Inferno, I watched it and I was like, okay, this was watchable, but it was like funny bad. You know, it was like, it was in that very thin zone where it's bad enough that you can make fun of it and the movie kind of knows it's bad, so it's making fun of itself. I don't know about the other two. I've only seen Inferno for some reason. So we'll see when we get there. But I think this will be the low point of the season. Whoopee. So.
There's not a lot of behind-the-scenes information really for any of them. I couldn't find out anything about like why, like the spark was, you know, why was this made? Whose idea it was, like, you know?
I couldn't either, but if I had to theorize, and again, this is just me theorizing, I think the Walt Disney movies like Air Bud, Air Buddies, you know, those movies.
You know, live action, like, but not like the Pirates of the Caribbean live action, like the lower budget, like family, you know, PG rated, not probably going to make a lot of money, but doesn't cost as much relatively. Obviously, just going to be making millions of dollars because they're Disney, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. With the Air Bud movies, there was a spin-off called Air Buddies, and that came out in 2006. And from what I understand, that movie was successful, quite successful, successful enough to basically spawn its own franchise. And I think this sort of may have been born out of the success of those movies as well, because it's very similar in style and content.
So just remind me and all the listeners out there, Air Bud is like the dog that plays Frisbee, right? Or something like that?
Basketball.
Basketball. Gotcha.
Yeah,
Frisbee, man. Why do real dogs play Frisbee? Why do they even say that?
It's a golden retriever who plays basketball. Apparently, I'm just finding out now it had 4 sequels. So that's cool.
All right.
Apparently, Buddy is a real dog as well. The dog that movie's based on. Anyway, so my theory is that...
Chloe.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Chloe is based on a real dog, actually. It's like the only fun fact I could find about the first movie.
Yeah, unsourced on Wikipedia.
I will say, here's a couple of fun facts that I put together. Tippett Studio helped with the visual effects. Tippett Studio is the studio founded by Phil Tippett, who did and the Tippett Studio also worked on the special effects for the RoboCop trilogy.
Yeah.
What a fall from grace that is. And I believe it's pronounced Heitor Pereira, did the music. We've seen them before on Triple Play because he did the Despicable Me trilogy. But he only did the music for the first and the third one, not the second one. Could not find out why.
The second one was oh man, I forget who it was. It was done by some pop musician or hip hop or something.
Yeah.
Remember? I don't remember that fact. I don't remember who it was.
It's
but
Chris Hejame? That's the composer listed on Wikipedia.
Oh, for Despicable Me Too?
No, for Beverly Hills.
Oh, for
Chihuahua
Beverly Hills.
2. Because Heitor Pereira also only does 1 and 3 for... I think Pharrell Williams helped with the score on Despicable Me.
Right, that's what it was.
I think he co-wrote it with Heitor Pereira. Heitor Pereira did Beverly Hills 1 and 3. Beverly Hills Chihuahua 2 was Chris Hajim. Could not find out why Heitor Pereira didn't do the second one. Clearly he comes back for the third one, so I'm not sure what happened there.
No, and there's really, like, that's pretty much par for the course for all of them. There's really not much out there, which probably, again, I would guess just means, like, the production was just smooth going. There were concerns as well with this movie, though, that it would spark this sort of Chihuahua craze, I guess, and make people want their own Chihuahua, which is why they had that, like, disclaimer at the end of, like, if you're gonna adopt a Chihuahua, like, know what you're doing. Because apparently Disney had this before, like, when they released 101 Dalmatians. Like, Dalmatian people, a lot of people went out and got a Dalmatian, resulting in, like, Dalmatians being adopted by people who had no idea what they're doing, and getting adopted into bad homes, and just all that sorts of stuff. So
yeah, I had no idea that 101 Dalmatians sparked, like, Dalmatian fever, I suppose is what I read it was called. But that was one of the very few things that I liked in these movies. In the first one, there is a plot of them, like... Because a lot of people, when they adopt dogs, were like, they'll get purebreds, and the purebred breeding scene is... like, that culture and playing into that, giving money to that, perpetuates this, just terrible conditions for the dogs and people who breed dogs, like, on their own, who are not actual breeders, and then sell them because people want a certain breed. And one of the things that I really appreciated and liked about the first movie, especially since both of the dogs that I've had since moving to America have been rescues, is that in the first movie, all the dogs that they find on the street get adopted during the movie by people who just want a dog. It doesn't matter what breed, and they adopt rescues. And even, like, Chloe's a purebred, but, like, one of the important things about the first movie is that, like, Poppy was a rescue, and that, like, the landscaper who owns him rescued him off the street, and, like, and I appreciate that they're, like, really playing up the, like, you can get a rescue, and, like, there are a lot of dogs who need homes already. You don't have to go to a breeder. So
yeah, that was true in real life too. Like, the dogs who played Poppy and Chloe, which I found, one source said it was each dog had multiple dogs playing it, but I couldn't find any verification for that. But at least, the one who played Poppy was scheduled to be put down, like, in a day or two, and they rescued him. And George Lopez had this, like, weird comment about that of, like, he said something along the lines of, like, it's amazing to go from that to having your picture on a billboard all across, the U.S. And I was like, okay, I guess that is pretty cool, but, like, it's a dog, it doesn't care,
Yeah, it reminds me of Dog from Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, who was also, like, was scheduled to be put down, like, a week after they took him for the movie and he got adopted. I read that 95% of the dogs in Beverly Hills Chihuahua 3, and I assume this is the same for the other two, were rescues or from the pound, and they all ended up with, like, happy homes by the end of the movie production.
So they say, yeah, but yeah, all right.
Yes, so they say, but I have seen no evidence to the contrary and no evidence not to believe that fact. So in the face of lack of contrary evidence, I will choose to believe that.
All right, man. It's your prerogative.
Look, I appreciated that one of the big things about these movies, for all the weird messages they're sending to kids about, like, classism and racism, which I'm sure we're going to get into soon, one of the things I did appreciate was them saying, like, rescue dogs are cool. There are dogs who need to be rescued. And like if you want a dog, there are tons of dogs who are looking for a home that you can rescue from
Yeah.
like the pound or
Yeah.
from rescues. And so I appreciated that. Again, one of the very few things I liked about these movies, because the first movie has like actual talent behind it too. Like Jamie Lee Curtis has won Golden Globes, has been nominated for multiple BAFTAs, and has been in like really big movies, like Halloween. Like that was her big breakout
Yeah, hasn't she been
role.
in like every single Halloween?
Not not all of them. I think there's like one that she hasn't been in, or a couple that she hasn't been in. She's actually, fun fact, she's the daughter of Janet Leigh, who plays the lead female role in Psycho.
Huh.
I didn't know that until I was looking up things for this trilogy. So,
Huh.
and then like Drew Barrymore, Andy Garcia, like there are there are big names behind the first movie. Andy Garcia was in Godfather Part 3,
Right.
was in Stand and Deliver, which is a movie about lower class Hispanic kids studying to take the AP Calculus exam. Like he's been in these really big movies. Same with Drew Barrymore. Drew Barrymore is like a huge actress. So they clearly got all this huge talent for the first movie. I guess we've talked about this before, how like animated movies will get lots of big name talent to voice their characters, because they're hoping to draw in people to see the movie.
Of all ages, I guess. Because
Of all
kids
ages,
aren't
yeah.
going to care like who the voice actor is. Most kids, at least.
Yeah, and I'll see if I can find it, but my roommate was telling me about, there's a video where some guy on like a late night show did this thing where he interviewed kids, and he was like, hey, so like, what did you think about, I don't think this is in the video, this is just one I'm thinking of, but like, what did you think about Tim Allen as Buzz Lightyear? And they're like, well, Buzz was cool. And they're like, yeah, but what did you think about like Tim Allen? Like he was the one who voiced Buzz Lightyear. And they're like, whatever.
Yeah. To an extent, I would say I still agree with that. I definitely, for all movies, TV, for everything, I think what happens on screen is more important than the behind the scenes, and more interesting. Which isn't to say the behind the scenes is not important. I just think the movie itself is like more important and interesting to look into.
I agree as well, generally, but I think there are some people who have very recognizable voices, and sometimes you want your character to have a specific voice, and so in that case, I can understand why you would cast someone with name recognition. This trilogy is the perfect indication of how, like, who actually does the voice doesn't really matter, because in your brain, you don't, without connecting the voice to the face, you don't notice that the voice has changed. Basically, every dog in these movies is recast at least once, some of them twice.
Except George Lopez.
Except George Lopez. And I'll tell you this, I didn't freaking notice. Like, I didn't notice
Yeah, if
at
I didn't
all.
know that going in, I wouldn't have noticed.
But, like, Tim Allen as Buzz Lightyear is a good example, because I do think, like, Tim Allen has a pretty recognizable voice.
Yeah.
But, like, Drew Barrymore apparently
It
does
wasn't
not.
even the dogs either. Like, most of the humans got recast. In fact, all of them did.
Yeah, I think the only person who came back, or two people came back from the first movie, and it was Delta. Who the hell is Delta? I don't know.
The Bannerman.
And Poppy, George Lopez. Everybody else got recast. Which, yikes.
Well, speaking of,
Yikes.
movies being expensive, I read, again, no source on this. It was just on a random, post that I found about it online. But apparently, every single shot, not scene, but shot, that included a dog's mouth moving cost like $2,000 to make that happen. Which is like, wow.
Huh.
So this is like, I mean, it's not like a low, like, this is a, it had the big name actors. It had the, money they put into it to actually make the dogs' mouths move, which is the most frightening thing I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, because it's like, it doesn't even look bad. it's in this weird uncanny valley section where it's like it looks like their mouths are actually moving. It doesn't look like CG, and it's like that's to me that was like okay,
Yeah.
this is
Just like
weird.
it looked too real to like. It's like the thing is with like CG. Yeah, you get into that uncanny valley area when it's like it looks real but not real enough. Like it looks almost real enough but not. But like with this, it's displaying something that you already know isn't real. So even if it looks super realistic, which it did, it still gives you that feeling, you know?
Yeah, and it sucks. Not like it sucks. It looks bad. I mean, it looks fine. It sucks because it
Yeah, it's like
just
for the
is
first
weird to
half of the first
watch.
movie, I was like very uncomfortable watching it. And then afterwards, I kind of just got used to it.
Yeah, I mean, I went to bed and I woke up to Keon texting me in all caps, Jesus Christ, the way the dogs' mouths move. So, I mean, all the money's on screen, right? I definitely think the third one, as it came to the end, I was like, I think they ran out of budget for the mouths because they're kind of starting to seem like it's falling apart there.
By the end of the third one, I was checked out. I was like, I cannot pay attention to this movie. Like, and I almost never do that. I mean, I've had the tradition of watching the Star Wars Holiday Special every Thanksgiving for like 5 years or 4 years. I ended it this year, and like I would pay attention to it like every time. But man, that third movie, that Beverly Hills Chihuahua 3, like couldn't do it.
Oh yeah, I no, I wasn't even like, yeah, I wasn't really in it to
But
win
the
it.
first movie was because it came out and it was pretty successful.
Yeah, it made $149 million on a $20 million budget, which is quite good. However, you know, if you're looking to specifically watch a movie from 2008, allow me to tell you about all these other much better alternatives: Dark Knight, Mamma Mia, Wall-E, Quantum of Solace, Kung Fu Panda, Madagascar 2, Iron Man, and Slumdog Millionaire, all of which came out the same year as Beverly Hills freaking Chihuahua.
Yeah, and that's not even getting into the more indie stuff that you might be able to find in 2008 if you like dug deep. Those are just the mainstream ones, and yeah, they're probably all better than this.
I've seen all of the movies I just listed except Slumdog Millionaire and Madagascar 2, and I would freely rewatch all of them 20 times before I even watch the first 10 minutes of any movie in this trilogy again. Oh, I also read unsourced that the dog who played Frank the Pug in Men in Black makes a cameo appearance in the first one. Unsourced. Didn't even
Yeah,
have a picture.
might have been the token gay pug.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, we're not going to be able to ignore the elephants in the room.
Yeah, which is like how this movie like definitely promotes to varying degrees like racism, classism, yeah, homophobia to a smaller extent than the other two, but still.
Yeah, I mean, let's just talk about it while we're talking about the first movie. I watched the first movie and I was like, all right, I'm ready to watch Beverly Hills Chihuahua, whatever. It's a movie about a dog in Beverly Hills. Did not expect the classism between Chloe and Poppy. Just Chloe being like, you're all scum 'cause you live on the streets and I'm Beverly Hills. The like super casual racism through the whole movie. Just like at
Oh
one
yeah,
point, like Viv, I can't believe I know it. Viv is the owner of Chloe, and her niece, Rachel, I
yes,
believe,
Rachel.
is looking for Chloe. We didn't even explain the plot, but
It's fine. We
Chloe
don't have to.
goes missing. She's looking for Chloe. And so is the landscaper because the landscaper's like, oh shoot, my dog is in love with Chloe, which I'm going to talk about that when we get to Beverly Hills Chihuahua 3. I have lots of thoughts there. But she has this line where she tries to say something to him in Spanish and he's like, what are you saying? And she's like, why did you pretend you couldn't speak English? And he's just like, I didn't. You just assumed I couldn't speak English because I'm your landscaper and I'm Hispanic, I guess is like the implication at the end of that statement, which is like, holy moly, like this girl just like made a racist assumption about this
Yeah,
guy.
and I mean the gist of the movie is that like that's don't do that like and the gist of the movie too is like don't it's like it handles these topics and what it comes out the other side like I guess with something tangible and I guess good, but like it does so in like the most inept way possible that like actually ends up reinforcing exactly what it was what it seems to be against. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. And that's I think the reason why it does that is because a lot of the jokes in the movie are like a lot of the jokes are based in racial stereotypes.
Yeah, in
Like a
fact,
lot of the jokes,
most of this movie's plot and humor is.
yeah. I mean, here's just a sample of some of the quote jokes unquote I wrote down from the first movie. Uh, one dog says quote "Hasta la bye bye" unquote instead of "Hasta la vista," which I don't know how hard that is to say. Poppy, I think at some point says "We're no wait sorry we're Mexican not Mexicant." At one point, Poppy says, "I'm gonna go all kind of Mexican on them." All right. At one point, there's an entire secret Chihuahua society that just co-ops like Mesoamerican history for its own purpose. That's
Oh yeah,
cool.
the thing that was worse, the worst thing in all three of these to me was not like the blatant racism classism. It was the erasure of like indigenous history. That like
Yeah, because
that's
they play into it in the third one too, where they're like Chihuahuas were secret messenger dogs for the like Mayans, and I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa,
two also
hold up.
two doesn't even like mention the they say Aztec once in two, and it's not related
Mm-hmm.
to any of the stories that like that what's his name Poppy tells the kids, which is also just probably like made up garbage. I don't know for sure, but like I don't know. It's just yeah, man.
Yeah.
And I'm usually not one to like engage in like I don't know what you'd call it like moral criticism or like coming at a story and saying like yes do these does the morality or whatever that this story promotes is that in line with what I think, and if so it's good, and if it's not it's bad. I tend to stay away from that or try not to do it, but like man man.
Well, I think for this movie, it's a particularly egregious offense because these are movies that are explicitly made such that their primary audience is kids. And, like the first movie was a theatrical release and kind of like seems to sort of say that a lot of this is like okay. This like this classism, this racism is like that's all right. Like the Beverly Hills people, like, okay, I get it. Like, real people who live in Beverly Hills are snobs. Like, okay. But the movie never does anything with that beyond just making them snobs and the main character and the protagonist without ever examining, like, hey, maybe you shouldn't be a snob.
Yeah, it's just I think definitely it like it teaches kids bad things. Like it just does.
Which is something I want to talk about with the second one, especially about you were talking about the erasure of like Mesoamerican history. And that's like there is no indication in these movies that the stories Poppy is telling his kids are
Historical
fake. Yeah. Well,
or
fake, basically. Because my point that I'm going to make is that kids, when you're watching an animated movie, it's like obvious you exist in this animated universe.
mhm.
And there is an element of fantasy to these movies because the dogs can talk. But if you're a kid and you see a live action movie, you, in my opinion, are less likely to assume that a lot of it is fantastical. So it's less obvious when like Poppy's telling his kids the story about dogs, chihuahuas being messengers of love for like the Mayans or the Aztecs, and how they like built tunnels and corridors for the chihuahuas. Like, do you really think kids are going to know that that's a fictional element in this movie?
Yeah, it's a good point. Plus, it's like the way it deals with all of this is like, yeah, that was all, like long ago, um, in the past. Yet, like, I mean, there's still plenty of places in Mexico today where it's like, um, people still speak indigenous languages and, stuff like that. I mean, it's not like it is
Mm-hmm.
here where that's just a, where that, which that doesn't, that doesn't mean, that doesn't mean that like what the history of that in the US is okay, or it's like, it doesn't mean that's okay to ignore that here because there's so many fewer percentage wise, I guess, speakers of indigenous languages and stuff like that. But like, it's different in Mexico where there's like, it's a significant, portion more, I guess, especially in southern
Mm-hmm.
Mexico. So it's like,
Yep.
and the way these movies go about it is like, yeah, that was all in the past, and you know, indigenous. It doesn't address, like it doesn't address Native like Americans or indigenous people at all. It just kind of throws these stories in and is like, this is stuff that happened back then. Back when? Who knows? Like I don't know. The movie doesn't say. Uh, when is this all happening? I guess it's like these depictions are like pre-Columbian or something. So I don't know.
Yeah. And the other thing is just like the subtle things that are like steeped in stereotypes, which I didn't even realize until it was pointed out. For the first movie, I stumbled upon a review and it was like, it would probably be easier to give this movie like a higher score or a better review if it like wasn't so difficult to ignore the fact that the movie presents Mexico as like slums,
Or
and that's
yeah,
it.
or just like the touristy destinations.
Or the tourist
Yeah.
traps. Yeah. It doesn't let Mexico or the Mexican people have their own culture or autonomy in the movie. It just presents Mexico as like dogfights, gangs, poor people, slums, and then tourist traps. It like plays into because the plot of the movie, I guess, the way they constructed it requires those locations specifically in Mexico. I guess even when they go to Mexico City, we only see the like touristy parts of Mexico City and not like when we see LA in a movie, for example, we see all of LA. We see the gritty parts, but we also see like the suburbs, generally speaking. Not every movie, but when LA is presented, we generally see both the nice and the bad parts. Apparently, for Mexico City, we'll see the tourist traps, we'll see the gangs, and that's it. We won't see like the regular people. And I mean, I think that's dangerous because I think that reinforces this belief that like that's all these people or all the people there play into these two roles.
Yeah, and again, it's like, I mean, it's like you mentioned, this is like basically a kids movie. So like, I don't know, just feels like, and I don't know, maybe I'm getting hung up on that, but like, I don't know, just for me, the biggest thing about these movies is that they kind of like they teach like bad, or they have bad messages to convey to kids, and that's like, I don't know, it's kind of messed up.
Yeah, I mean, I think so because I mean, movies for kids are more. The messages in movies for kids are more likely to be like formative messages. Me as a 24-year-old or a 25-year-old when this goes out, like I can watch a movie and be like, that's fictional, and I don't agree with what the characters did, or I don't agree with X portrayal in the movie, and that's fine. I have enough knowledge and experience to know that that's possible. If you're a kid, you may not necessarily have the life experience, like I said earlier, to know that these things are fictional. And even if you do, you may not have the ability or the intellectual knowledge to understand that you don't have to agree with the movie when it's done. And that's why I think it's like more problematic that these are kids' movies and they present these ideas because it's like I don't think racism and classism should be in any movie as the main theme of the movie. We just want to get that clear, but it's more insidious in a kids' movie because again they don't know, like they don't know that they don't have to agree.
I guess. I don't think, as a kid, you're even thinking in those terms of like, do I agree with this or not? You're just kind of like absorbing these things. Yeah.
That's the other thing. You may not even be conscious of what the movie's telling you. Like as you get older, I think you become more conscious of these things. Like I didn't really start noticing these things in movies till I was like in my late teens, probably even early 20s. Where I was like, oh, that's kind of like last night. Last night I watched the movie Panic Room with David Fincher, and I was watching the movie, and then I was like, oh, it's kind of weird that like the only African American character in this movie is the only one going through a custody dispute with their kids. That's kind of a weird stereotype to play into. But I didn't like get to the point where I even consciously recognized those things till I was older. So you make a good point. They may not even like recognize that these things are there.
And it's also that like line between like no matter whether a movie's for kids or anything, any story, it doesn't even have to be a movie, it can be a book or TV show, whatever. Like there's that line also between like criticizing something and like aestheticizing it or fetishizing it, and to some extent, even when you criticize something like or try to in fiction, you're gonna end up doing one of those other two things to some extent. But like I don't know, this trilogy kind of tips the scales too far into the like aestheticization, fetishization, and stuff like that. So in my eyes, I guess. And again, I can't even believe I'm coming at it from this perspective. Because when I try and usually fail, I guess, to be critical about movies, I usually try and stay away from the moral aspect. But I guess for these movies, I'm not.
Fair. Fair. I don't know. I think anything in a movie is fair game to criticize, you know?
Oh, I do too.
And for these movies, it happens to be the morality.
Yeah. Which apparently most people didn't have too big a problem with because the movie was successful enough to get 2 direct DVD sequels.
Because again, I think a lot of it is like not necessarily really obvious until you start to think about it. Like, yeah, it is weird that the only, Mexican people we see in the movie are either part of a gang or working at the tourist trap or the police. Until you start to think about it, you're like, oh wow, that's kind of, or like all the jokes. A kid might just think, oh, like we're Mexican, not Mexican. That's just a dumb pun. Like that's pretty funny. But like when you think about it, like that's pretty weird. Like what if an American was like, I'm an American, not an American can't. Like that'd be pretty weird.
I guess that one seems kind of innocuous to me. I mean, yeah, it has this weird, it's tinged in this weird way because it's in this movie full of all this other stuff. But like,
yeah, I mean,
that specific example was kind of, I was like, all right, yeah, it's kind of funny. Not really, but it's like it's just a pun in my eyes. It's just yeah. Other stuff definitely no, but
the second one, I guess I don't have anything else to talk about the first one, so I'm talking about the second one, like totally normalizing the like stay-at-home mom trope. And like totally normalizing how like the dad gets to be the fun one and the mom has to be the one who lays down the law for most of the movie.
Oh yeah, I guess. Yeah.
And it's not till the end where Chloe's like, you're finally being a real dad. And even still at the end, and going into the third one, he clearly hasn't learned anything. But there's a line in the second movie when they said it, and I was like, okay, alrighty. Because Chloe is like, so why do I always have to be the bad one? Like, can't you sometimes discipline them, Poppy? Like, why am I always the bad one? And Poppy responds with, because you're so good at it. And I was like, it didn't even process at first. And then I was like, whoa, hang on. What? What?
Yeah, I'm. That's my reaction to like. I don't know what does that line say to you? Like,
it's like to me. It's basically saying Chloe's a bitch,
yeah,
and that's all she's good for. I do like in the second movie, the collar that Chloe's wearing gets stolen in the first movie, and in the second movie they go on a vacation and just they didn't learn their lesson. Chloe walks around wearing a diamond-studded, multi-million-dollar collar just everywhere, like again.
Yeah, the weirdest thing. I guess we're just talking about the weirdest and like most uncomfortable things from each of these movies. But for me, the second one was, besides all the retcons, I guess, which there are like actual retcons in the second one, was like. They talk about what was his name? What was the guy's name? Sam or something like that. They talk the guy whose parents were getting evicted. The main guy. Yeah, Sam. So they talk about that house and like he talks about where he grew up and stuff as if it's like not a good place, but yet that neighborhood like looks very wealthy. First of all. And they talk about like how the house is like really small, but it just looks like a normal house. It looks like even a house that like I mean, it just looks like upper middle class. Like,
Yeah, I know what you're saying because while they're driving there, they're driving through a neighborhood that doesn't even look that bad. I mean, I've lived in Johannesburg. I've seen bad neighborhoods.
yeah, LA
But they
has
talk about it like it's the worst neighborhood you've ever seen. And I'm like, wow, all right,
yeah.
sure.
It looks very like yeah upper middle class. Just all of it, the house, the neighborhood. Yet they're talking about it like it's just the worst possible conditions you could be in.
And again, like part of the weird morality of the movie, I guess, is that, yeah, it looks upper middle class, but they're driving through it and they're like, they've made it a point that Sam grew up in like a Hispanic or Latino neighborhood, and they're like, it's the worst neighborhood ever. It looks so bad. Like, it's so poor. And it's like, it's not. And it's so it becomes a weird race thing where it's like, so is it bad then because of the people? Like, is that what we're supposed to take away from it? Because it doesn't look bad otherwise.
Yeah, it's true.
Just I have a comment that's like, wouldn't be Beverly Hills Chihuahua without the casual racism. But I don't even know what comment that's referring to in the movie because I didn't write down the comment. Just that.
Well, it is a thing throughout all three of them. So
I was impressed that they somehow worked Delgado into the second movie. I was like, because he joined the Mexican police force, the Puerto Vallarta. I don't know if I
Vallarta?
said that quite right. Vallarta, thank you. Police force at the end of the first movie, and then in the second movie he just shows up, and I'm like, what? What? And then they just retcon it into him having two kids who were part of the L.A. police department, I guess.
yeah, it was like that was whatever. I didn't care about the stories themselves, but
Delgado was the best character in the first movie. Straight up, I'm just gonna drop it right now. Delgado was my favorite character in the first movie, and they totally like just like destroyed his character in the second two movies. And then Beverly Hills Chihuahua 3.
yeah, which again, very little information to be found online about the making of 2 and 3. Apparently, a lot of the information I found for 3 was based on a launch party event thing that they had for 3, which apparently they invited just a bunch of like I don't know what you call like
Mom
mom
bloggers?
bloggers. Yeah, like just moms who blog about their mostly extremely boring lives from what I saw from the blogs, which is weird to me that they would do that, but weird that they would invite that type of blogger. I guess like you can blog about whatever you want, but yeah,
Yeah. I mean, my favorite one is the one where the blogger asked questions to Chloe and Poppy and got like responses. That was my favorite. Chloe and Poppy are just like the greatest cinematic characters ever created, so to be able to interact with them in real life must have been a real treat.
yeah. These blogs were they did kind of tick me off to be perfectly honest, because like I don't know, one of them just started with like, as everyone knows, like Disney makes the best movies ever or something like that.
You didn't know
It's
that?
just like one expand your I'm not even that well watched, I guess you could say, or well versed in movies, but like come on, expand your cinematic like experiences here. And two, like they don't, I don't know. And then it was just they just talked about like, I don't know, how the blogger's parents really enjoyed 1 and 2, which also pissed me off just knowing the fact that there's people out there who like these movies.
Yeah, I read one of them. I don't know if you read this in one of them, but one of them was like, my parents loved Beverly Hills Chihuahua 1 and 2. And so when they heard there was a third one coming out, I had to watch it with them.
Yeah, that's the one I'm referring to.
And that's fine. You're allowed to like any movie you want. That's fine. Just didn't realize people could be so chipper about such a weird franchise. And by the way, my favorite part of the third one, and this is like playing right into this like weird chipperness of adult fans of Beverly Hills Chihuahua, AFOBHC, is all the like, I don't know how many of these you picked up, but the weird references that only adults would get. For example, there's a No Brown M&M's reference, which
Yeah.
is a Van Halen reference.
Yep.
And there's one that completely slipped under my radar and subconsciously processed, and I was like, whoa, hold up. And I had to go back. And when they're choreographing their dance, the like, okay, the coded gay pug goes like, come on, let's get a little bit of Fosse, a little bit of Twyla. And I'm like, that's a reference to Bob Fosse and Twyla, I don't remember her last name, both of whom are famous Broadway choreographers.
Yeah.
Bob Fosse, who also directed movies and like choreographed Chicago. No kid is gonna sit here and be like, yes, Bob Fosse. That's a reference that I'm gonna get.
The writers probably just did it to entertain themselves. Honestly,
For that, all respect to them, because I thought those were like the best thing in the third one, and they weren't even that good. It was just like, I caught that reference, nice.
and I think that entire sentiment was kind of my takeaway from all of these. Of like, they weren't even like we talked about before, they weren't even like the Troll 2 level of bad, where it's like the movie is so ineptly made that it isn't enjoyable on the level of like just making fun of it and watching it and seeing, and just, it's just so, I hate to use this phrase because I think it's more, a lot of movies are like more nuanced than that, but like, yeah, so bad that it's good. It's like, it's just so ineptly made that it's just funny. And this isn't even that, especially the first one. The first one is 100% just like hits every single Disney note and gets the hell out of there. Like, and it's just, you don't crack a smile at anything. It's just, exactly what's coming. There's nothing like interesting about watching it.
Yeah, I mean, using the term unoffensive to mean like not bad or good, like it is a completely mediocre. The first one is a completely mediocre movie in my opinion. Like it is not special in any way. It does its job as existing as a movie and potentially being entertaining for some people. The second and the third one are like bad, not really entertaining, and there are not enough things in it that are bad for me to make fun of. And the most interesting thing about Beverly Hills Chihuahua 3 that I found out while researching was that the actress who they cast to play Rosa after the previous one left retired from acting after making this movie and became a zookeeper and is now an animal keeper at Animal Kingdom in Disney World, Florida. And that, like, movie was so bad she just quit acting. No, I don't think that's actually what happened, but it's fun to think that that's what happened. So, just also just want to throw this out there, the weirdest quote, joke, unquote, in the third one. I don't know if you caught this one, Keon. I don't even know if it was a joke, but the one dog who's fallen in love with the VIP dog, I don't even know the dog's names, is like, oh, I'm in love with this dog. And he's talking with, I think, Poppy, and Poppy goes like, oh, is she fixed?
I remember that. I didn't.
What was the point? Like, what?
Yeah. I didn't think it was a joke. Like, I just didn't know what it was even about, because they just ignore it from then on.
They don't even he just goes, I don't know. And then at the end of the movie, God, the most frustrating thing is that, like good movies do, they brought it back at the end of the movie, because the female dog goes, I'm thinking about having kids, I'd like to have kids, you and me. And I'm like, oh my God, so she's not fixed. Oh my God, revelation.
Yeah.
Just what? We didn't even talk about the second one playing up like the classism between Beverly Hills and like the quote regular people unquote like Sam. But I'm kind of over it. I want to talk about how they work as a trilogy, because to be honest, they kind of suck as a trilogy.
Yeah, pretty much not at all.
There's like no narrative through this.
No, and I think that's the case. I'm not the expert on this, but I from what I do know, that's the case a lot with like direct to DVD sequels that skew even younger than the first one. Is like they almost feel like just this series of like vignettes about the characters from the first one, instead of like a coherent movie, which I hate to say that, because 2 was a coherent movie. It was a bad movie, but it was like, yeah, it was all leading up to something. But I don't know. And
Well, I know what you're saying because the third one, to me, I was like, is there even a plot? Because the second one, there is like a driving force behind what they're doing is that Sam is being evicted. They need to find $40,000 to save the house. You know, Sam's parents are being kicked out of the house. The third one is like they get a job at a hotel and they just like sweet life of Zach and Cody it
yeah.
up for an hour and a half, which is a topical reference because I'm 90% sure like Mosby, the hotel owner, is in the second one as the dog show judge.
Oh wow.
Um, but yeah, the third one is just like it's just vignettes of their life, and that's part of the reason why it just doesn't work as a trilogy at all. Also, because the second and the third one actively retcon the first one, like
Yeah.
actively retcon things set up in the first one. It's like they didn't even trust their own
Yes,
backstory.
the recasts and the retcons too. Two and three are fairly coherent, I think, together, but one is not with one. And they even, I mean, they rewrote Sam and Poppy's entire story from between one and two.
Yeah, because I believe in one, the story was that Sam adopted Poppy from a
Right,
shelter,
because he
right?
was going to be put down, which is exactly, it mirrors exactly what happened in real life. The dog who played Poppy, yeah.
Right.
But in two, he was just rescued off the street.
Along with this other dog they introduced who lives with Sam's parents. Yeah, weird. Maybe the second and third one take place in like alternate universe Poppy and Chloe. The first one also ends with them being like, maybe we'll have some kids, and a shot of them with kids. And then the second one's like, all right, we're gonna have some kids now.
They have the kids by the second one.
They have the kids in the second one because the second one opens with the dog wedding.
Oh, right,
Cannot
right, right.
believe I am enough of an expert on that movie to be able to say that. I should have my film watching credentials revoked.
Shouldn't they be awarded more vehemently though, or like shouldn't you be
Great.
more because
Okay.
it's technically it means you've watched more, you know, like
Great. Great. Delgado was my favorite character in the first movie. That's it. That's all I want to say. I'm. The dogs had to go through 3 months of training to act in these movies. I feel like I needed to go through 3 months of training to
3
be
months of
able
therapy.
to get 3 months of therapy to comprehend these movies.
I did learn some cool things about how they had the dogs act on set. Which these are coming the blogs that talked about the launch event for the third one. Apparently, the trainers were on set with the dogs at all times, which is fairly obvious once you know it. But before, like, it's not something you think of, and you're like, oh yeah, of course they would have to have the trainers on set. So they were directing the dogs from just off camera, and they used different pieces of equipment to keep the dogs' eyes focused on different areas, and it was cool, I guess.
Yeah, that was when I was watching these movies. One of the things that I was most interested to learn going into the research stage of this podcast, which was like getting all those dogs on screen and to act in that way must have been like, in some ways, a technical achievement. The most difficult scene I read was the quinceanera in the third movie. It took 3 days to film, and 27 dogs were on screen at once or on set at once, and that's why it was so difficult. But I couldn't find like a lot of information besides like the trainers were on set and there was a lot of treats and they took months of training to do it. Like there was nothing about the technical aspect of getting a dog to do what you want. Like if you have a vision in your mind, presumably, of like, oh, the dog needs to, picking a random scene from the third one, the dog needs to snap the spandex of the other dog. I can't believe that's what I went for, but okay. Like how do you execute on that? You know, how do you train a dog to like grab another dog's spandex? Or how do you cut that together to make it look convincing? Because it did. I'll admit it. It looked convincing that the dog did that. And I wanted to know how do you do that? From a technical standpoint. And I couldn't really find anything.
Yeah, I guess just film bloggers at the time and now are just not interested, both because the movies suck and, I guess most people are just not as interested in like having animals on set, or like they're not as interested in like the animals on set aspect as they might be in like the tech aspect or something, or maybe there's a different filming technique that a movie uses or something. But like, yeah, I even read that chihuahuas as a species don't naturally pick up things with their mouths, which they do all the time in these movies. So even that is like, man, that takes an intensive amount of training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. To bring it full circle, even back to the beginning of this podcast, one of the things I've always liked about this podcast, um, and what I hope we do more of in this new format moving forward, which we can discuss more, is that part of what I like about movies, part of the reason why I watch so many movies is because I just like the technical aspect. Um, I like the act of movie making. I like seeing the finished product of multiple people and like how they realize that on screen. That's one of the things that I really like about movies. Even if a movie's bad, I appreciate the technical aspects, which again is why this week I was like, I really want to know about these dogs. Like, how do you film dogs? Because that's interesting to me. But I guess it's not to most people. And also, like you said, I guess this movie's not considered great. Bad movies are typically, even if they make some technical advancement, are not well remembered. Not a lot of people talk about how they were made, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
So,
I think that pretty much sums up what I have to say. Just, yeah, the, yeah, I mean, I don't know, just like the way the movie like leverages these stereotypes and how it's just otherwise just a totally unremarkable movie. It just kind of adds up to me, like just being like, yeah, whatever, like I'm just gonna move on, and I hope I never have to watch these again, type thing.
yeah, I mean, I agree. They were utterly mediocre and I mean, I have nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's it. They were completely mediocre, and we'll move on. I will say we normally talk about expanded universe. Apparently, there was a TV show in development. It was going to be an animated TV show. Was developed for about a year. Um, they were getting ready to make the pilot, allegedly, and it fell apart at that point. I don't know why it fell apart. It kind of never happened. It never came together. And this concept does seem like it would work better as a TV show. The third one especially makes me think that because the third one feels like vignettes in their life. Kind of feels like if they made, I don't know, 25-minute little stories that this animated, this could actually be like a really good idea for the kids show, but it never happened.
Right.
So, and on that note, I don't have any emails this week. I don't think we have any comments on social media, so I'll just go right into if you would like to reach us. You can email us at thedoctor@decadvegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on this trilogy or any of the trilogies this season. You can find us on YouTube at Decadent Vegetable. You can find us on any podcast platform, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, so on and so forth, at Triple Play, a movie trilogy podcast. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast and follow us on Twitter. And next time, we're going to be watching what I already know is going to be a much better trilogy, which is the Dark Knight trilogy. But until then, the end.